Hello everyone, Simon here. Welcome back to our architecture tour of Dishonored. We are in the Distillery District. The next part of the game has us moving through this district into further onwards into another place. I forgot the name of the square. Anyway, so this is the Distillery District because there's a distillery here. And I was just looking at this thing. Look at that. That is a steel bridge. So remember, or you can see it there, so you see the old stone bridges have all kind of fallen down. I guess they've been demolished deliberately to be replaced by steel bridges. I think that's what's going on. I mean, that would make sense because the steel bridges would be more efficient than maintaining the stone bridges. Anyway, so the Distillery District, what can we say about it? Let's walk up there. So you start, in the game, you start off here and you're supposed to creep up, so you're not going in the main door, as it were, because there are enemies trying to kill you up there. Actually, well, look, that's steel underneath there. So this is a steel bridge, but then on the other side, it's broken. So it ends there. I don't know what that means. Does it mean it's under construction? Or does it mean they're not gonna build it? Like, what is in there? I'm not too sure what to make of these broken bridges. Actually, no. Oh, the whaling boats. Look at that. You see how the whaling boats are taller than the old bridges? I think what's going on is that the bridges were too low, so the old stone bridges were too low for the new ships that were being developed, and so they have to rebuild the bridges. But then they still. I don't know what they intend to build later on, though. Anyway, the bridges are a bit of a mystery. I think the old bridges have to be rebuilt. Is what's going on, and it would make sense because the whaling ships are actually taller than the old bridges there. So, down by the water, they're dumping bodies into these barges because a lot of plague victims are in the city and they're all dead. Yes, the whole place has gone to the hounds. So, as we can see, there's the old city again. It's always nice to look out, although there's nothing new there, is there? Okay, let's go in. So the Distillery District has, actually, is that a map? Oh cool, there's a map, look at that. Area map. You are here. 1 to Holger Square. Holger Square is where we're supposed to go. The game wants us to go there. 2 to the Golden Cat. That's another part of the game later on. 3, the old Dunwall Distillery is there. And then 4, Clevering Boulevard. So this is basically the map of this place, and you see that broken bridge there. And a lot of really tall buildings. Well, not really tall buildings, but rather really kind of buildings packed close together and really crowding the street. Alright, so that's the overhead view of it.
Attention, watchmen.
There's 2 streets crossing each other, although they don't actually join up. That's a little bit strange. I think this is meant to be a street, except it's been closed off here with the steel wall. But then it doesn't actually join up with the other street except by the stairs. So if you're in a wheeled vehicle, like if you have like a cart or a wagon, then you can't actually get them up the stairs. That's a little bit strange. In fact, it's a lot strange. But this is another street up here. This is, I guess, the main street with the tram rails. And in fact, there's a police tram there as well. Okay. We can see another one here. So this is a cargo tram. I think they're unloading bodies from this thing and then dumping the bodies onto the barges to get rid of all the plague victims. Alright, that's pretty bad news. So, alright, so these rails are used for trams, but they're not passenger trams, they're cargo trams. And let's go down this way first, I think. So the distillery is this way, and this is like an industrial district, right? Or it looks that way. It could also be an
Attention Dunwall citizens.
kind of
This is a special
residential
announcement from our honorable
Bitter
Lord
Leaf
Regent.
Elms House.
This
So
is the
this is
Lord
a...
Regent speaking. It is with regret
Alright dude,
that
shut
I
up.
announce that my
So
term
this is
as Lord
for
Regent
sale,
is extended
plague.
through the month of
So this is
harvest.
like where the poor people live, because that's an
Attention
Elms House.
in addition,
Actually no, it's not an industrial district. This is just a
the
poor
overseers
residential
of the
district.
Abbey of the Everyman
Granny
have
Rags
maintained
lives
service
here. So this is
and are
a
in authority
rundown
to enforce order
I will
house.
never watch. Never, never, never.
necessary.
Well, I mean, it's the poor district, but the rooms are quite large, and you can kind of tell that it used to be quite nice. Like, if you look at the wood paneling and things. So it's not that it was made to be poor houses from the start, but that it's decayed over time and it's become poor houses. It seems like. In fact, there's like green carpets and things on the staircase. So that's interesting to know. There's a thingy in the room. That's a bit weird. But yeah, it's not. It's not designed to be budget accommodation. It's actually designed to be quite luxurious, but it is run down and poorly maintained. There are other apartments back here too. And wait a minute. So I guess this is pedestrian only, this particular side street. Just trying to figure out like how would vehicles get back here. I guess they won't. You can't get vehicles back here. This is pedestrian only. Saloon, shaving, shampoo, hair cutting, right? So there are businesses back here. This is a barber shop. In fact, it says R. Williams, Barber and Stylist, right? So, you know, like if your shop is off the main street like this, it's the rent is usually cheaper. So this is like a cheaper rent and also not a very profitable business. Griff's Curio shop. So there's small shops back here. Although this is just a... Is this a shop? Where is his shop? Is it just this open space? Not sure. So the thing about like rundown and old districts and poor districts is that, you know, on the one hand you might think, well, I mean, these are poor people, that's not very good. Maybe we should, you know, try and make them less poor. But on the other hand, there are certain businesses that are able to exist in these environments, but not in richer parts of town because the rent will be cheaper, for example. And so the barbershop, like this one, like, you know, they might not make enough money to be able to pay the rent in a different part of town, and so they would exist in this part of town. And they provide a service, and they make enough money to pay the rent, and they make enough money to live by. So it's not like it's, you know, it's not like it's a bad business. It's just that it's not quite profitable enough to be in the rich part of town. And sometimes if you try to say replace the old buildings with new buildings, then the rent will go up, and then they can't actually afford the rent anymore, and then the business has to shut down. So sometimes you make things worse by building new buildings in poor parts of town because people can't afford the rent. So this is a room. Again, it's a pretty large room. I mean, everything's falling apart, and like, the staircase is gone, and all the walls are moldy and crumbling. But the design of it is, I mean, it's a pretty decent room. If you imagine this place was cleaner and better maintained, this could be a nice apartment. I mean, there's no windows, which is a bit weird too. But other than that, this could be a nice apartment. So it's not like a fishmonger. Okay, this is a fishmonger here. They're selling... I'm not sure I would eat that. Alright, so a fishmonger, barber shop. These apartments we have to magic our way up there because we can't actually, because they're closed off. Right? Let me just come over here. And then I'll come up here as well. Is there actually... Okay, I guess there used to be a door here, but it's closed off now. It's a bit strange. Because this is bricked off, but there are corpses here. So how did these corpses get here? If that's bricked off, like how do you even get up here? That's not an exit. And neither is that. So, I mean, if that wasn't bricked off, if this was just like a locked door, then this would make sense. But the fact that it's bricked off is a little strange. So this is, again, an apartment. There's only one room though. Fairly tall ceilings. But, so, you know, it's like, you know, as uses for a building change, it gets renovated, right? And so like a big, expensive apartment might over time become divided into a number of smaller apartments in order to be able to let out to people who can't afford to rent the big apartment. In fact, these days in Europe, in parts of Europe, like some of the old palaces and old estates get turned into apartments for people. Like, you know, so you take a palace, or you take like a big old building, and you just kind of divide it into smaller apartments, and then you rent it out to people for holidays and things, or even to live in. So that because we aren't actually rich enough, like nobody's rich enough to live in those palaces anymore, and so you divide them up and you rent them out. And yeah, these apartments are decent. Aside from, I mean, the furnishings are bad, but the spaces are decent, right? I think this is meant to be a bedroom. It's kind of dark in here, isn't it? Or is it a bathroom? Maybe it's a bathroom. So bathroom, there's a bed there. I mean, there's a stove, and you know, it's like a studio apartment. And there's the door back there to get out. All right, so this is the poor part of town, and we are looking at how the poor people live. Let me get down from here. And let me go to the other side of the map, because in contrast to the poor part of town over here, the rich part of town is through this gate. Although the gate itself also deserves a little bit of discussion, I think, because there's no real reason why there's a gate here. Like, why is there a wall and a gate here? Well, in terms of gameplay, it's because there's this thing here, and it's designed to be an obstacle for the player. But you'll notice how, look, this is the street. There's a tramway in the middle of the street, and then there's spaces for vehicles, and then there's a sidewalk for people to walk down. But all of that gets squeezed together into this narrow gateway. And then it expands out again into the other side of the road. I mean, what this implies is that nobody's allowed to go through here. What it implies is that a pedestrian is not supposed to walk from this side of the town to this side of the town, because this is only for trams. Like, even the vehicles aren't supposed to go through here, only trams. So it really, this wall really separates the poor part of town from the rich part of town. And this is the rich part of town, by the way. You can kind of tell because it's slightly better maintained, and the buildings are slightly fancier too. There's balconies and there's big windows. Right, so this is the fancy part of town, and that's the poor part of town. And only trams are allowed through. And you know, this it's a little oppressive. You know, it's a little divisive and segregationist and all that. And the game presents you with a setting that is oppressive, right? Because there's a police state going on. There are guards walking over the street, and they're not here because, you know, the point of the game is you get past them. So they're gone now. I took care of them. But this security apparatus, like, you see these little steel things, they're portable guardhouses, and, you know, and portable barricades and portable spotlights and these kind of electric wall things. So the game presents you with a lot of city watch guards, and barricades closing up buildings as well. City watch guards with the new steel technology, and security apparatus and security bits and pieces that they use to control people and obstruct your movement. But having, like, you might think, okay, well, but then the steel technology is recent, right? Because we've established that the setting of the game is on the cusp of an industrial revolution, and so all this new security technology is new. But if you look at this, it's a stone wall. Like, this gate is not new. This gate is old. This gate is, I mean, the stone is stained. It's not clean, right? There's stains on it. There's cracks in it. You see there's cracks in it. So this wall has been here for some time, right? Like, the stone is a little bit cracked. It's not pristine like this stuff is. Well, I mean, it's not entirely pristine, but it's new, right? It's not rusted or anything. So the stone wall has been there for some time. So the police state, what I'm trying to explain is that the police state is not new. There is new security equipment that they're using, but the idea that the poor part of town is walled off from the rich part of town is not a new thing in this setting. It's an old thing in this setting because the wall itself is old. So this has been going on at least for decades. So this wall has been here for at least decades, is the way I'm reading it. And so we can't say that, like the oppression. What I'm trying to say is that the oppression presented in the story is not. It's not a new phenomenon, and because, I mean, we didn't really pay attention to the story in this video series, but the story is that the Empress gets killed, and then the High Overseer takes over, and then the police state clamps down on the city. But what this wall is telling us, what this is telling us, is that it was oppressive even under the Empress, right? I mean, maybe it wasn't as oppressive, but it was still, like, the city was still divided. Like, the rich and the poor in the city were still divided, and like, if you're a rich person if you're a poor person walking along the street, you're not allowed to go into the rich part of the town on foot, right? That's what this implies. And in fact, this thing here again, I mean, there's a street here, there's these rich houses, and then again it closes off, and so you're not really allowed to go through here on foot, although this is slightly wider. It's slightly wider, and you go from the rich residential part of town to a commercial part of town, I believe. There are more shops here, so there's a hotel there, you see that, right? Hotel and shops and things. We're going to come back to this later on. But the division between the rich and the poor is not I mean, if the game wanted to present to us that this division is a new thing in the city, they wouldn't have made it out of stone. They would have made it out of this same metal stuff, right? If it's a really new thing, it would just be like, metal panels. Actually, I can show you. Remember, the other street was blocked off by the metal panels over here. They could have built the wall and the gate out of this material here, which is the metal stuff. And that would imply that the wall is really recent, right? It's only maybe a few months or a few years old at most. But that's not what they chose to do. They chose to put this enormous stone barrier in. So it's not a temporary thing, it's not a new thing, it's an old thing. So it's always been... The city has always been divided, is what the implication is. Let us go into the rich houses, right? So we've seen the poor houses, actually. What does that say? Offices of Dr. Galvani, right? Offices of Dr. Galvani. I think he lives here too. I think it's meant to be also his home. Alright, let's come in here and let's see for ourselves an example of a rich person. So are these... Oh, they're gonna... Hold on, let me just punch these rats a little bit. Alright. So, through the front door, through a little entryway where you can take off your coat and things, and then we have things on display. I believe these are technological baubles, bottles, butterflies, and moths. That's the High Overseer, I believe. Alright, and then some paintings. That's cool, look at that. So the ground floor, there's a hall right at the front door. There's a hall showing off some fancy stuff that the doctor has collected. And then on one side we have the kitchen, which is good, but usually the kitchen would be near the dining room. This is also the kitchen. Wait, is this dining or is that? No, this must be kitchen too. This is a huge ass kitchen. Wait a minute. So this is where they cook things. I suppose this is food storage. Right. So there's kitchen over there, and then on this side there are, I believe, servants' quarters. So bunks. I guess this is where the servants sleep. Right, and then toilet for the servants. Right. And you'll notice tall ceilings. The ceilings are even taller than in the poor district. So the poor district, the apartments are pretty decent. Here, they're even more extravagant. Let's see. Although it's not that well maintained, is it? Oh, I guess it's because the city's been abandoned for a while. So things are falling apart slightly, but not quite as much as in the poor district. Alright, wood paneling, and everything is detailed and great. Even in the kitchen, everything is detailed. And then upstairs, we have a... Is this dining? I suppose this would be dining. Alright, there's a bit of bread, and let me just eat the bread. So dining would be here, which is alright. I mean, you have servants carrying the food around for you with a fireplace. Fireplace and also heaters. Alright, so there's like a sitting area and dining, and then back here... Huh. I suppose this is like a... I don't know what this is, like a washing area? Also not sure what this is meant to be. I mean, it's just a corridor with nothing in it. I suppose it's more living space. And then back here there's a bedroom, so I think this is the doctor's bedroom. Because it's quite fancy, right? I mean, there's a big fancy bed with a fireplace and bookshelf and documents and books and things. Right? Right. So, cool, fancy bedroom, double bed. Well, it's the size of a double bed, but I think it's meant to be for one person because there's like one pillow there. And then, on the third floor... Also, just notice the floor to ceiling heights. It's crazy, look how tall these spaces are. And when I say that, what I really mean is that you could just put another floor in here and you have twice as much floor space. Like, if you care about money, if you care about renting, like if you care about living space and how much, you know, actual floor area you can use in your building, you would put another floor in here so you have more space to live in. You can have a 6-story building in this place, whereas right now they have 3 stories. Anyway, it is quite grand and quite extravagant. So up here we have a laboratory for the good doctor. He is a biologist and he's cutting up fish and bull rat fetus. Delicious. Let me just eat this bread. Right, so and another bathroom, or a toilet at least. There's no bath. Lab, and then there's even a secret lab back here. More lab. Oh, is there loot back here? Oh, look at that. I can't take that. So more land. So the entire upper floor, the entire third floor, is laboratories. Oh, here's a bath. It's in the lab though. That's kind of strange. There is running water. Wait. There's hot and cold running water? I'm not sure that makes... I mean, there's no pipes there, so I'm not sure how that works. Anyway, there's hot and cold running water apparently in that bathtub. Alright, so this is what the rich part of town looks like. And as I said, we can compare this to the poor part of town. And I mean, it is significantly more extravagant. And in my opinion, really needlessly extravagant. Because it's not particularly efficient, especially the floor-to-ceiling heights being so large. It's excessively extravagant, but I guess it really highlights the economic inequality in this city, right? That some people can afford this opulence, whereas other people live on the poor side of town and have a lot less. So good. So in this part of the game, we can see the differences in the lives of the different people in the city, and we can see their economic circumstances. Like the rich people, they're also decaying a little bit. Like things are also getting a bit run down inside their houses, but nowhere near as badly as the poor part of town. Really, really huge differences between the rich and the poor, like really huge differences. Is that would I say the same for our societies? I guess it's the same in the real world too. I guess the question is like how many people are super rich? Anyway, before I'm just kind of thinking to myself and wandering in here. So this is the Bottle Street Distillery that we're walking into. It's a distilling. I'm not sure what exactly they're distilling, but it is alcohol, I believe. I don't really know how they get the stuff out, because the entry is super small, right? And there's a staircase here, so how do they get the alcohol out? I'm not sure. But entrances aside, there's, let's see, the underside of a building here. Well, actually, no, this is the loading area, except it's been fenced off. If it wasn't fenced off, you'll see that there are actually tram tracks here. So I guess this is where they would load the cargo and move their goods out of the distillery. It's through there. Okay, I get it. Wait a minute, that's not tall enough though for the trams, is it? The trams are taller than that. Unless it's a different kind of tram. It's a little inconsistent, the scale of things. But anyway, this is where they would have moved the goods out. And we have various distillation things. This wall has broken down, which is a little bit strange. And there's a bunch of lights there. And another archway. I'm not sure. I mean, there's no gate on this archway. I guess this is the distillery proper. I mean, look. There's a number of portals, right? There's a number of gates. There's a gate there. There's a gate there, and then there's a gate here, and then there's another door there. And in terms of gameplay, what happens is that each area has enemies patrolling the space, and you're supposed to get through one space after the other. So in terms of gameplay, it makes sense to divide the space into a series of rooms, as it were, and have gates between them. Even if they're open like this, so that you can divide the space into a series of challenges, right? Because in terms of gameplay, that's what you want to do, is you have one challenge after another. You don't want the whole thing to be just one giant mess of guards running around randomly. So dividing the space up like this makes sense for gameplay. I'm not sure this makes any sense in terms of a real distillery, because there's too many gates. There's too many walls. So this is the distillery proper, and if we come through this door here, and again, like, how would they get the stuff out? Is that meant to be... I mean, it's fenced off now. Was this a window or was that a door? Because there's barrels and things, and as we go inside here, you'll see there's more barrels. Dunwall Whiskey. Okay, it's a whiskey distillery. And again, the really tall spaces. This game is full of these really tall spaces that... I mean, it's a waste of space. It's uneconomic. Alright, so I have a control room. There's a bit of a storage back there that we... Can I get back there? Alright, so there's a storage back there. I'm not sure if we need to look at this. It's just another room. Alright, let's get back down. Control room overlooking the distillation equipment. And you can see some distillation equipment back there, although the scale of it is probably too small for a real distillery. Well, maybe it's just a small distillery. I'm just thinking there's not that much whiskey in here. In fact, most of the space is just empty space, and again, it's not very economic, is it? But I mean, we have to consider this also for gameplay, and the fact that it's open enough for you to look around. It is there are guards here, or there used to be guards here. Here's a guard here, a thug. So in terms of gameplay, you need a more open area to either sneak past or fight your way through the enemies. But in terms of a distillery, it seems like a waste of space. Also, the roof is not there anymore. Look at that, it's hardly there. So the rain would just pour straight in because the roof is all broken and things. That is also strange because look, the distillery is not. Like, they're still running. The machinery is still going. Look at that, the steam coming off it. What is that, money? Cool. So the distillery is still going, but the roof is broken like that. I don't know if... I don't think that's plausible because if you rain on your machines too much, they're gonna break down a lot. And it's not that it's just metal sheeting, right? So it's not actually that difficult to just cover that up again to fix that. It's not like it's a stone ceiling and there's a lot of work to do to repair it. No, it's just metal sheeting. So repairing that should be really easy. So I'm not sure I believe that it would be left like that. I mean, if the building was completely abandoned and it was no longer in use, then that would be slightly more believable. Anyway, we have whiskey in barrels back here, so storage on one side, production on the other. And in fact, all these barrels go all the way back here, all the way back here, and all the way back here. And there's a little bit more equipment back here, and I think this is meant to be the office. Or maybe that's a secret office. So all the pieces are here. I'm just not sure about the scale, and I'm not sure about the proportions. Like, how on earth would you get those barrels down? There's a crane here, but the crane doesn't even reach up there. How did those barrels get up there, and how do you get them down again? So, you know, if you think about a distillery, all the pieces are here, right? So you have a control room, you have the machinery, and then you have storage, and then you have the office. So all the pieces are there. I don't think the proportions and the sizes are correct. I think like the storage probably should be bigger, the production space should be bigger. But all the pieces are there, so I mean, I'm not gonna complain too much because video games do this. Just like, you know, back outside, the streets don't join up. Like, there's one street and then there's the other street, and then they don't actually join up, and there's a staircase between them. So things like, in a lot of video games, there's a lot of all the pieces are there, but they don't actually fit properly. And that's because they have to modify spaces to serve gameplay. And also, often in video games, spaces are shrunk down in size in order to fit a lot of variety into a small space. So if you think back to the rich district, there are 2 rich houses. I mean, the entire neighborhood is two houses, which doesn't make any sense. So the scale is all weird, and also the space has been distorted for gameplay purposes. But aside from that, the pieces are all there. The distillery... I still think the roof should not be broken like that, because the distillery is still active, and presumably still profitable. Making alcohol, surprisingly, is more resilient than you think. Like it remains profitable even in adverse circumstances. Should we walk back out or should we magic back out? I suppose we can climb back out. I don't want to do too much of this climbing because I want to walk through these spaces as though I was a normal person. But if we think about it that way, then this also is... Actually, no, this is correct, because this is the rich part of town, that's the poor part of town. So there's no easy access between the rich part of town and the poor part of town, and that is consistent with this wall that tries to keep the poor people out, right?
Attention, Dunwall citizens. The following businesses have been closed and impounded by the state due to contamination. Barrow's Barber Shop and Surgery, the Duke and Dancer Ale House, Merritt's Printing Firm, Pennyworth's Tack and Saddle Emporium, and the Smoke Street Dice Hall.
So, interesting that they list a business like that. So what was it? The printing firm, dice hall, like a fishing shop. Interesting. I mean, it tells you about the economic activity of the city. I don't really think there's anything to see down here, but there is an alleyway down here under the street. Although, if you notice, I mean, they put streets above other streets. So if you think back to the sewers and how old streets turn into sewers, you can imagine why that would take place if they make a habit out of this. If they just keep building new streets on top of old streets, then the bottom stuff eventually, of course, will become sewers. So they seem to make a habit of doing this in this world, where they just build new streets on top of old streets, and just let the old cities become run down. It's a thing that happens in the real world too. Maybe not as much. Paris is famous for having catacombs under the city. In fact, we might look it up just for a little bit of reference. Okay, there's my mouse. So if we go Paris catacombs, the catacombs, there are actually a substantial amount of stuff underneath Paris. Map of former underground mine exploitations in Paris. There used to be mines underneath Paris, and they buried the dead people in there. Entrance to the catacombs. Plan of the visitable catacombs drawn by the IGC during 1858. There's not that many pictures of it. Rome, I think, was also famous for like having stuff underground. Like having stuff built on top of other stuff. Alright, so moving past the rich part of town and into the commercial district. So slightly less fancy than the rich part of town, but I guess a bit wealthier than the poor part of town. We have the same barber and stylist, so they copy and pasted the barber and stylist up here. I mean, that's a bit lazy, but okay. Are you a dead counter? No, I'm not a dead counter. For sale. So a lot of vacant houses because everybody's dead. And there's no more people to live in these houses. And that's an interesting phenomenon too. Maybe not as familiar to English speakers, but Russia has since the Soviet Union disbanded, a number of places in Russia has become, should we say, less popular to live in, or less viable to live in. And so a number of places in Russia are shrinking, like their population is shrinking. Oh, Detroit is the famous example in the English-speaking world. Detroit also saw shrinking populations, especially in the city center. And so parts of Detroit, and I guess in other parts of America too, like everything's just abandoned. It's actually kind of crazy. So the phenomenon of shrinking cities and then shrinking populations is uncommon, but there's enough of them for us to study them and to look at them, and it's quite interesting, also quite sad. But the world of Dunwall here in this game is in a similar state. Like what happens to a city when people move out, and then things starts to like everything becomes vacant. One of the things that happen is that the infrastructure fails. So you have, especially things like electricity and water and roads. Like you have like water systems and road systems that are designed for millions of people, but when like 1 million people move out, all of a sudden the remaining people have to maintain the same infrastructure, and it's not economic anymore, right? And you can't just say, well, we'll just stop repairing half the roads, because then like which half do you stop repairing? Like you still need the whole road network to serve the people who remain. I mean, you might say, all right, everybody move out of half of the city, and we just kind of squeeze everybody into the other half of the city. But then you have to like force everybody to move, and that's not easy either. So when things start to shrink, you run out of money to maintain the infrastructure and maintain things, and everything. A lot of things end up falling apart. A lot of things end up being just completely unaffordable, and you just abandon it because there's no good answer to what should be done when a city no longer needs to be as big as it is, right? So this is I guess one of the things that's happening in Dunwall, and part of what they've done is that they've just abandoned parts of the city. They've walled off sections of the city, and then they just abandon it and let it decay by itself. Let me just check some of these shops. What is this? We don't really know, do we? One of the windows has been replaced by a piece of wood. We don't really know what's behind these buildings here. The Golden Cat is behind here. So the Whisky Distillery is still working. The Golden Cat, if you can't tell, well, I mean, it says the finest ladies in all the aisles. It's a brothel. So the brothel is still profitable. The Whisky Distillery is still profitable. And I guess that really explains what's going on in the world. Prostitution and alcohol are the only businesses that remain. Alright, so I think this is all we need to say about the Distillery District. So what do we see? We saw the conditions, or the lifestyles of poor people and rich people in this setting. And there's serious inequality, and also the structure of the city itself is designed to wall people off, is to keep poor people on the poor side of town, and to keep the rich people on the rich side of town. And really, you can't walk from one side to the other. Like you have to take the tram. If the tram even stops in the poor parts of town, it probably doesn't. So serious segregation, serious economic segregation, even before the plague and even before the recent militarization of the city. Like this metal stuff, this is recent. But the walls are stone, and the stone is about the same age as the surrounding buildings. So as long as the city has been like this, there has been economic segregation between the rich and the poor. And that's what we read from the architecture. Okay, I think that's it. Alright, in the next video, we will go into Holger Square. Alright, I'll see you there.